Hi, my name is Mary, and in today's video I'm going to be sharing with you two different biographies of Anne Lister, and making a recommendation of which one I think you should read. If you're not already familiar, Anne Lister, who was also known as Gentleman Jack, was a woman who lived from 1791 to 1840. And during that time, she was a landowner in Halifax, but she was also an amateur scientist and a really profoundly well-traveled person. She's quite interesting, but what are most remarkable about her are her diaries that she left behind. Now, these diaries are about her excruciating details about her social life and her health and her business, but also about her sexual liaisons with other women. And so that has made her kind of a symbol of lesbian sexuality that people can point to and say, we do have a past and we do have a heritage. Now, if you're not already familiar, Gentleman Jack has also been the subject of an HBO series adaptation that was created by Sally Wainwright. In this, you get Suranne Jones starring as Anne Lister, and it's quite a fun little show, and I'm very excited that it just got another season declared, so we're going to get another season, I think, next year. So, just so you know, this is going to be a little bit of spoilers about Gentleman Jack the series, because I'm going to be talking about Anne Lister's life and kind of the general arc of the television program. So if you haven't watched it yet, I recommend you do. I thought it was a lot of fun. I like a kind of cute, silly, gay period drama, why not? And so, just so you know, you might want to wait to watch this video until after you have already seen the series. So I decided to pick up two different biographies of Anne Lister that had come out in the last couple of years. The first one that I'm going to talk about is this one, Gentleman Jack, The Real Anne Lister by Anne Choma, and the next one is this one, Gentleman Jack, Regency, Landowner, Seducer, and Secret Diarist, a biography of Anne Lister by Angela Steidele. Now, because these two are both called Gentleman Jack, I'm going to refer to them as the Choma book and the Steidele book, just to keep things simple. Let's first talk about the Choma book. Now, this one is written by the actual screenwriter of Gentleman Jack, one of the screenwriters, named Anne Choma. It's a paperback, it's the official tie-in, and it clocks in at 258 pages. So, as the movie tie-in adaptation, this book follows the arc of the television program quite closely. So you get a little bit of information about Anne Lister's life before she meets Anne Walker again, and that's about 60 pages or so, and then the most of the book talks about the time in which they were courting. They take communion together, seal their commitment, on I think page 254, and then 257 is the acknowledgements. So in that tiny bit of time, we go with the last 6 years of Anne Lister's life, and it's all summed up quite quickly, including her death during one of her last voyages. This is where I'm going to compare it to Angela Steidele's book. Now, this is a beautiful 338-page hardback. I absolutely love this dust jacket. Just want to show you on the back really quick this quote from Anne Lister's diary. I love and only love the fairer sex, and thus beloved by them in turn, my heart revolts from any love but theirs. I just think that's so beautiful. I think this would be a great gift. It's quite very aesthetically pleasing. So this is the main comparison that I wanted to make between the two books, which is that this book takes a much broader approach to Anne Lister's life than Anne Choma's book does. So, for example, let's compare how long the courtship of Anne Walker takes in the two books. This courtship in the other book takes up almost the entirety of the book. You have 60 pages before and 2 pages afterwards. However, the seduction and the marriage of Anne Lister in this book goes from page 186 to 218. That's when they meet for the second time and then when they get married. So that's this out of the entire rest of the book. As you can see, Anne Walker's relationship is not given undue attention when it turns out that Anne Lister had a lot of different relationships with women, some of which she took quite seriously and some of which she took not so seriously. I want to next turn to the treatment of Anne Lister by each of these books. And so, in doing so, let's talk about Anne Choma's. So, again, Anne Choma's book has an introduction written by Sally Wainwright, the creator of Gentleman Jack. So, in this, she's talking to Suranne Jones, and she's talking to Suranne Jones about the personality that Anne Lister had. And Anne Lister was not always the kindest person. We're going to get to that more in a second. As Saran astutely observed when we started rehearsing Gentleman Jack, she's a bit Marmite, this one. That is not Anne Choma's words, obviously, but it is the attitude that I think that this book takes to some of Anne Lister's personality quirks. Now, the thing is that when we talk about what some of these are, I was a little bit shocked that they haven't. Basically, what I mean by that is that Anne Lister was, amazingly revolutionary just for being a lesbian and being able to love women as openly as she did during the 19th century. That's still extremely impressive. And I'm not about to start saying that I think I should cancel every historical figure just because they don't live up to my own ideals of social progressiveness. That being said, sweeping it under the rug is also not something that I want to do either. I think that would be kind of woefully immature of me as a historian. So, the thing is that Anne Lister was a landowner. That means that she was invested in Tory politics, invested in the politics of the ruling classes, the landowning classes. She believed that people who did not own land should not be able to vote. She bullied her own tenants when they did get the vote to make sure that they would either vote along what she wanted, that is, vote Tory, vote blue, or be kicked off of their land. She operated coal mines, which had some really difficult conditions, including employing child laborers. But she was also just kind of, personally, a little bit of a nasty person. And so I struggle when talking about this because obviously I think it would be hard to get a sense of what someone was actually like just by reading their diaries. But it really is telling that she had unfortunate things to say about absolutely everyone she met. Even Anne Walker, who would become her longtime partner, she referred to as stupid quite often in the book. It was clear that she thought herself intellectually superior. And so while reading this, one of the other things that I was shocked by was that in Angela Steidele's book, she talked about some of the more, caddish things that Anne Lister had done. So if you have just read perhaps Anne Choma's book, or just perhaps seen the television program, you might be under the impression that Anne Lister was just falling passionately in love with all of these women, but they kept being pulled away from her by their commitment to men and marriages, that sort of thing. It leaves out all these interesting historical episodes where apparently Anne Lister was pursuing 3 sisters at the same time while living under their house, or cheating on her long-term partner, Mariana, and kept promising that she would be loyal to her and then just not being loyal. And it's one of those things where it starts to get kind of worse and worse the more you look at it. So, for example, at the end of their lives, they start to, Anne Walker and Anne Lister, that is, they go and take a journey to Moscow, and Anne Walker at some point says she has had enough, she wants to go home. The thing is that Anne Lister does not want to go home, and she doesn't think that her pretty little wife should get a say in the matter. She tries to have Anne Walker's assets frozen at another point in this book, and so it is really kind of frightening to read that she just kept pressing her on. She was intent of going all the way down to the Middle East, to the Caspian Sea, and I was really struggling while reading this, trying to understand how such a remarkable person could be so inconsiderate of her partner, who she recorded in her own diaries saying that she did not want to go on this journey, did not want to travel this far. And then when they tapped into Anne Walker's financial reserves for them, Anne Walker just kept getting more upset. Anne Lister, unfortunately, is not a perfect person, but it really did take me a while into the next book that I read, Angela Steidele's book, to realize just how imperfect she was. I'm going to quote from the end of Angela Steidele's book, because I think she really does sum up my thoughts on the matter. Let's get into this. At the end, while she is wrapping up her thoughts about Anne Lister, she says, "I have had a similar experience with Anne Lister to all the women in her life. First, she seduced me, then she betrayed me. I feel very much the same. It does feel like I was so caught up in the euphoria of 19th century lesbianism that I lived in a world where Tories don't exist." Of course, I'm a big girl. I know really better than to expect that historical figures are going to live up to my own standards of social progressiveness. But still, I do not exactly think it's fair that a book would try to sweep under the rug some of the less fortunate aspects of someone's personality, especially when they are quite as dire as Anne Lister's. And in that respect, I really did feel a little bit more connected to this version of her story. In the end, can I really blame Anne Choma for writing a book that is flattering to their main character, their protagonist of their television series? I don't know. Personally, because I was interested in a much rounder history of Anne Lister's life, I did feel like it was a little bit unfortunate that some of her politics were swept under the rug, especially because I also don't think that a protagonist needs to be wholly good in order to be interesting. Especially during the second half of the show, the next season, I am hopeful that they're going to explore some of those aspects of her more fully, and maybe we'll get an additional movie tie-in book published that will explain some of the more unfortunate aspects of her personality. Let's next talk a little bit about the formatting of the two books. In Anne Choma's book, you get a lot more information, I think, about the general beats of the television program, but in doing so, they have a lot more kind of exposition and summarizing of Anne Lister's diary, and a lot fewer quotations from it. Angela Steidele's book reads almost like reading Anne Lister's diary, but with just enough information thrown in to give you context. And so in this one, there's definitely a lot more quotes from her diary. I think that is pretty interesting to compare. In doing so, I also want to compare just the general writing, I would say. This one is definitely a lot more casually written, and Choma is more likely to do things like compare Anne Lister writing a particular letter to texting a date after you've just gotten home, whereas this one, it's a little bit more academic, but generally speaking, I would say that they are both very accessible nonfiction works. That being said, I want to go into my last point, which is the general nonfiction aspect that I find the most troubling about this book. That is that it does not have an index, and for me that is a huge red flag. I don't know how to verify the information within this book because there's nowhere for me to look up what her sources were, especially sources that are not directly in the diaries, and so that's a little bit troubling. On the other hand, Angela Steidele's book has a huge, hefty index that I'm definitely going to be trolling to look for more information from some of the letters that I found more interesting. Alright, so those are my thoughts on the two. Just generally speaking, to wrap things up, I would say that my recommendation for a biography of Anne Lister to read, if you want a more holistic look at what she was like as a person and the trajectory of her life, I would recommend Gentleman Jack, Regency, Landowner, Seducer, and Diarist by Angela Steidele. If you would like a book that is a little bit less negative about Anne Lister, or that is more closely related to the television program so that you can kind of get a sense of what was actually the history behind all of the events in the show, I might recommend Gentleman Jack, The Real Anne Lister by Anne Choma. But in the end, I gave this one 3 stars, I gave this one 5 stars. This would be my recommendation. Alright, we've reached the end of the video. I would love to know your thoughts down below. If you have read either of these 2 books or another biography of Anne Lister, or if perhaps you might be interested in one of them now, or if you're just watching Gentleman Jack and you're as excited as I am for season 2. Thank you very much for watching. Bye!